Trying to call Catherine Delahunty.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Mr. Chair, I'd like to talk about part two, and this is my first chance I've got to go on the record. And I'm really pleased to have this opportunity. Now, I'll get in touch with my feminine side for the benefit of the House and speak in a delicate tone. So my question, Mr. Chair, is, does part two and the bill give all our citizens more power to ensure our collective future? No, it doesn't. Does the bill give everyone a sense of honouring our parents' efforts to create the assets? No, it doesn't. Does the bill give us confidence that our power bills will be safe? Not at all. And also, Mr. Chair, does the bill honour Te Tiriti o Waitangi? No, it doesn't. If we look at, and I'd like to agree with the speech of Hone Harawira about the attack on Te Tiriti in this bill, 45Q, Treaty of Waitangi, Part 2, and I find the clause very interesting, for the avoidance of doubt. So just in case anybody thought this nation actually was serious about Te Tiriti o Waitangi, just in case we actually thought we meant it, just in case all these MPs who trot off to Waitangi every year pretending to honour Te Tiriti, just in case we thought that the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People was actually a serious issue for this Parliament, just in case the government said it was fine to raise the Tino Rangatiratanga flag because it meant something, let's test that, just in case. And what it comes down to is 45Q2, for the avoidance of doubt, this section does not apply to persons other than the Crown. And if that's not a betrayal of Te Tiriti, I don't know what is, and it happened before when the assets were sold, and it's happening again. Some of us, me in particular, getting older, we remember what happened in the 80s. We haven't forgotten Roger Douglas, much missed from this House by some, but not by me. And what we are finding is a repeat of history that is very, very disappointing for the New Zealand public. But what I want to talk about as well is Te Tiriti o Waitangi, which is an obligation of Pākehā and Tauiwi katoa, not just of Māori. So it's not just the Māori MPs who should be standing up saying shame on this bill, it's the Pākehā MPs, because we are the beneficiaries of Te Tiriti and we have an obligation to stand up for it being implemented in full, not ripped off by this legislation. But let's get on to mum and dad, the favourite acronym, the favourite expression. Mum and dad. Now, if we were in the 21st century, which this bill definitely is not, it's a repeat of the 80s and 90s, we would not be talking about mum and dad. We might be talking about mum and mum, dad and dad. We might be talking about mum as a solo parent. We might be talking whānau, whanaunga, hapu. We might be talking about ainga, because we no longer live in the nuclear family, people. We live in a vastly diverse world where the families who won't be buying these shares because they can't afford them are actually facing real challenges. And what this bill really highlights is the ideological divide between people who think that we are shareholders who want to have dividends and profit, or citizens who believe we belong to a nation. So which one do we favour? Obviously the Greens stand for the concept of citizenship. We stand for the idea that buying shares and making a profit as individuals is less important, Mr. Chair, than actually the collective well-being and the ability to plan based on assets owned by us that we do not want to give away. So that's very interesting, this whole mum and dad kaupapa. Now, I went out on the streets and I've met some fantastic people on the streets of Aotearoa in the last few weeks and months. It's been really awesome. And some of them are mums and dads, and some of them are mums and mums, and some of them are grandparents, all of them lining up to sign the petition because they don't believe a word of it. They are not convinced by a word of this. And what's more, they are insulted by the idea that we have amnesia, that we can't remember what happened, that we've forgotten that we had to buy back the railways, that we've forgotten that you can actually have schools and hospitals without selling your assets, that nobody, if they are a decent budgeter, sells the roof of the house while they're in hard times. They keep the house and then they build upon it and they make sure they stay dry in the interim, instead of which we're going to sell off these things. Once they're gone, and then who gets to buy them back? The taxpayer, as usual. So the mums and dads and mums and grandparents on the streets of Aotearoa didn't say, oh, I wish I could buy a share, oh, I'm so excited. They said, what's it going to do to my power bill? And how dare these people do this in our name? And how dare they say they know how to run an economy in our name, because this is just a joke. I want to tell the story of one particular mother, because I think the human story is important. Mr. Chair, the human story is important. So this week I got a letter from Christchurch, and it was from a sole parent. Now, she's an unusual sole parent. She has a son in his 30s, and he is an intellectually disabled and often violent young man in his 30s, cared for by his mother at home. And she said to me, with regard to power increases, she said, we have no oven, we have no fridge, we have no phone, and I can't pay the power bill now. So I don't know how I'm going to look this person in the eye and say, well, I was part of a parliament that sold off the assets so that your power bill will go up. Because she already is not surviving. And if you can imagine, and I don't think we can, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, if this House can try and imagine what it's like to be a mother who is raising a child who will not grow up, who is potentially violent and is cold and has no oven or fridge or phone in this winter, and we're selling her assets. Not because she asked us to, but because that's what the government's decided is their way out of paying for tax cuts for the wealthy, which is something this woman will never be. And what's more, she will never be buying a share. She doesn't have a share in your vision of the world. Her share as a citizen is through the government owning assets that are going to provide a health and education system that should support her. And I'm ashamed to see the struggle that she lives in on a daily basis, and now we're going to make it worse. That is actually one of the most powerful reasons for standing up against this bill, is the human reality. Te treaty reality, human reality, is that you do not, sorry Mr. Chair, that the Parliament does not have the right to destroy something that has been given to us to talk about that belongs to the citizens of Aotearoa. So I will say that these emperors are naked, and it's not a pretty sight. I believe that many people in Aotearoa can see that you are naked, and it's certainly not something they're enjoying seeing, because that nakedness is the nakedness of an ideology that has failed in the past and will fail again. And basically, these people on the streets of Tauranga, of Hauraki, of Christchurch, who are signing the petition and lining up to sign it, and thank goodness Maurice Williamson is not naked, are actually doing a fantastic job of expressing their view. But unfortunately, they're not being listened to. And of course the National Party won't take calls on this. Of course they won't, because as a flagship policy, they're not prepared to defend it, they don't know how to defend it, and they don't even think they have to defend it. But the day will come. The day will reckoning, as a Cassandra on the wars of Troy. I tell you now, the day will come. It doesn't take a prophetess to tell you the consequences of not listening to people. So as a Cassandra, I'm saying to you that there are people out there watching you and listening, sorry Mr. Chair, people out there watching the government and listening to the government's extremely thin rhetoric on part 2. And we need to stand up now with those people and support the ownership of our assets. It is a pretty fundamental thing that this country should have something that belongs to all people, not just shares that belong to people who can afford to buy them. Now, maybe I'm mixing with the wrong crowd. Maybe I should make sure I should only mix with the private school crowd, or maybe I should just stop going out on the street and talking to people. But actually, there are many citizens from every level of the economy who understand how to manage a budget, and what they're seeing is this budget is not being managed properly. And if you have to sell the roof off the house, you've actually got nothing. So, Mr. Chair, I applaud all the people who've made the very complex technical analysis of this bill. I think Russell Norman's done a great job on economics. I heard a really good speech yesterday by Charles Chauvel. I have heard speeches by many people who've covered ground that I don't want to cover. But as a person working at a grassroots community level, and as a woman who has been a community worker and advocate for beneficiaries, I'm really ashamed that we're doing this ridiculous facade is going on in this House. This debacle is going on, and that the government isn't even trying to defend it. I can understand why they're not, because there's really nothing to say except we want to sell the assets. And the idea that the mixed member ownership bill is somehow different from selling 100% is all about smoke and mirrors, and it's all about naked emperors. So for goodness sake, naked emperors, go and have a look in the mirror. And it won't be a pretty sight, but you might learn something, and behind your shoulder you will see the people of this country lining up. They're lining up to tell you that we don't want to sell our assets, and that 49% is just a facade that will never work.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.